Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jesus Trejo Book Club. I'm super excited. Thank you for checking out the episodes. We got some more episodes coming your way. We got a lot of great guests, and today is special because I've known this guy for a while. I've known of him. This is my first time really like getting to talk to him. I saw him recently at a comedy show. A lot of great work from this man. Rafael Agustin is a writer and an award-winning on the award-winning CW show Jane the Virgin, author of the best-selling comedic memoir Illegally Yours by Grand Central Publishing. Has done so many amazing things. Rafael was also a founding executive director of Youth Cinema Project and the founding CEO of Latino Film Festival. Bachelor's, master's from UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. It's a real honor. Rafael, thank you for being here, man.
Dude, that intro's too long. I'm going to cut it down. Thank you for having me, bro.
Dude, this is great, man. I feel like we've crossed paths
several times,
but this is like the first time we're really sitting down and chatting.
This is so funny. Like, I have to make a confession to you and your audience. When I first saw you do stand-up, probably like 7 years ago.
Okay.
I thought you were from like New York.
Really?
I think it was your fit, the beanie, the beard, the glasses.
Yeah.
So I would talk to other comics and they'd be like, hey, you know Jesus Trejo? And I was like, yeah, the dude from New York. They're like, oh no, you're talking about another guy. And it wasn't until I saw you again and you were talking about your upbringing here. Yeah. And I was like, oh shit, motherfucker's from the West Coast.
Yeah. It's so funny. I did get that a lot early on.
Really?
It's like, oh, I either got Texas or New York. And I was like, no, Long Beach.
No, but it's a testament to how funny you are, because I think your comedy at the time was like so funny and relevant, exclusive to like the cholo stuff that we're accustomed to seeing a lot of like the up and coming stand-ups do here in LA. So that's why I was like, oh yeah, he's not from LA. And then I saw you recently again. I was like, oh my God, he is from LA. So I think I had it all mixed up in my head.
Yeah, I saw you at the Comedy Store.
It was you were performing with Marcelo.
That's right. I was, yes. It was a Spanish show.
That's right. And that even impressed me more. I couldn't believe you could do your whole set in Spanish. It's hard enough to do it in English, but to do it in Spanish? Damn.
I always say it's like working on your left. You know, it's like, even though Spanish was my first language, you know, it's like I'm more dominant in English. You know, it's like once you start dreaming in English, you're like, all right, that's your dominant language. But when you go back and try to do comedy, something like comedy, it's very hard because there's some buffering, you know, that happens. But
and there are things that don't translate. Like, I remember one of my friends was trying to explain to her Spanish-speaking dad, like, that we were going for a hike. And he's like, what's a hike? I was, you know, cuando caminas So he'll be like walking the dog, like, hey, mija, estoy on a hike. You know, because how do you translate hike in Spanish? It's so hard.
Yeah, it's like going for a walk, but like for fun, but like uphill.
Yeah. And like, why would you do that? So you're explaining and then they're questioning you. This is terrible.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, that's right. I was opening for Marcelo from SNL, and it was a Spanish show. It was we need more of those shows at the Comedy Store, that's for sure.
For sure. It was so great to see you all shine, and to shine at the Comedy Store.
Oh, man.
It's other level, man.
That's great, man. And yeah, it's great to have you here, man.
Thank you.
I've come to learn of all the great work that you've done over the years. I'm embarrassed to say at first I'm like, oh, you know, he's a screenwriter, you know, but it's like, you know, I come to find out that you have like you're involved in so many cool things for uplifting the creative community.
Trying. And that's the stuff, like, I learned that from one of my early mentors, Edward James Olmos, who's like, you have to give back in order to receive more. You know what I mean? Like, he truly believes that the success that he's at all came from how much he gave back to the community. He's like, because if you just hold that all in, like, that's not going to ground you.
Yeah, it's like Rick Rubin, you know, his book, he talks about it. And when he did the promo run for that book, he always says it's like, all of this is like an offering to like a higher being, to God, or, you know, whatever it is. It's like, because it's a gift, you know, you have a gift. He's like, you have to gift it back. For it to stay in one place, it does not make sense. So I believe that.
I gotta tell you, I think the person who best said it to me was Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin. She once told me, you have to give your blessings away to make room for more blessings.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the one. That's the one we're gonna use.
Yeah.
And you know, so you go to UCLA.
I do.
Getting in there is tough. So kudos to you. It's like did you always want to go to UCLA, or were there other places? It's like, tell us how one ends up at UCLA, and also to study what you studied.
Yeah,
Like, 'cause sometimes as Latinos, we don't always have the liberty or the approval to follow our
Let me
dreams.
tell you how I ended up in community college first, because I think my journey, my educational and academic journey, begins at community college, and that's because in high school I didn't know that I was undocumented. Like my mom kind of sheltered me from the brutality of what it means to be undocumented. So I grew up like obliviously dumb, thinking I was just like an all-American kid who had a thick accent, and I knew we were immigrants. I didn't know we were undocumented immigrants, I guess is what I'm saying. So then in high school, when I'm just an overachiever and trying to be like the class president, the prom king, and all this stuff, I applied to go to college. I applied to get my driver's license. And then I discovered like what it truly means to be undocumented, what it truly means not to have papers.
What a jarring thing, because as a young person, you're like, my eyes are set. I have no reason to believe I'm not able to have this opportunity that seems that everyone has at least a try at. And then how jarring of an experience that is.
And jarring in the time that it happened to me, because this was like the late 90s, before the Dreamer movement, right? This is before like Undocumented and Unafraid, and before like social media really was what allowed us to create community. So I was very afraid. I thought I was like the only one in the world. I didn't know what this meant.
Right.
That's why I ended up in community college, because I couldn't pay for higher education, especially in this country, with it becomes harder and harder for like folks from historically marginalized communities to achieve and attain that. Yeah, so that's how I ended up in community college, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do because, child of immigrants, and you think your parents want you to be doctor or lawyer or whatever, and I'm sure you share this, trying to be in the creative space.
Yeah.
But this is so stupid. I always talk about how like I didn't know how long my immigration problems would last. I don't know if I was going to get deported. So I just took every class in the course catalog, in the community college course catalog, in alphabetical order, bro.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, I'm going to join A for anthropology, B for biology, C for chemistry. Why did I take any of these classes? Think about how many classes I took before I got to like T for theater.
Wow.
It was a lot
Yeah.
It was a lot of classes before I finally found an outlet that allowed me to feel like, not to feel like I had worth, but it does allow you to like find your self-esteem, your self-respect, and your self-worth. Being able to like perform or create or write something for a group of people and be validated for it. Like I needed that. And I'm sure you probably felt the same in the stand-up world.
Yeah, it takes time. I think, it's like, when I see your bio and you're like, you study theater and, you got to follow something that really spoke to you. I think oftentimes people like you and I, first generation, or it's like immigrant kids that is a luxury. It's like, and yeah, to your point, it's like they want you to be the lawyer and this, and sure, that's great if that's what you want to do. But when your aspirations are different, that becomes like a whole thing. It's tough. I remember taking acting classes at Long Beach City College, down the way, and then my parents never knew about it. I took it on the side. I had already transferred, and I was still going back to Long Beach City College. Just so I'm like, I got to take these acting courses. They thought I was studying business the whole time, And
what did you graduate from?
Cal State Dominguez Hills.
And what though?
Business administration, marketing.
Wow! Look at that.
I wanted to do that, but it's like the creative. I wanted to go to college to be an animator at one point, because all I wanted to do was be a inker, like for like Disney. That's what I wanted to do. And I just wanted to study animation, but my dad was like, "You're not going to go to college to draw. It's like you're going to go to work with me." So that's what I did. And then later, if I'm sure you can imagine, it's like I ended up graduating, going to the Comedy Store. I parked cars there for many years.
Wow.
Cleaned toilets there for stage time. And my dad was like, "Wait, you're doing what with a college degree?" He goes, "No se estudia pa payaso. You don't have to study to be a clown." I'm like, "Let me show you that this is worth it." So it's so cool when you see like you had a vision and you executed it.
I did, and this all started by you asking like, how did you end up at UCLA? And I remember my parents were doctors in South America who came to this country to work at a car wash and a Kmart. You know what I mean? They were immigrants trying to make it. And I remember that my dad always said that he wished he could one day work at UCLA Medical. And I think that's what stuck with me. I remember thinking, oh, UCLA is like the dream or the goal. So
Institution.
yeah, so when it was time to transfer, I think UCLA was probably in the back of my head. Even though it was for the School of Theater, Film, and Television, it was still in the back of my head. Like,
Right.
oh, this is the place that my parents wanted to get to, and they couldn't.
Yeah, and like in the book, you talk about this too. It's like where your parents come to this country and they were forced to kind of take these jobs that didn't reflect the jobs that they had. Your parents meeting at that hospital, and then
Yeah.
like and then also it's like one of the things that really stuck out to me was that you talk about it in the book. It's like my mom was a doctor, right? It's like, but not the kind that you think, because it was part of this kind of uh, what was it that you said, socialized kind of like medicine. So it wasn't like the other thing, right?
So, I mean, medicine is medicine no matter where in the world that you go. So they are doctors. It's just that the economic system is
The
different.
system, there it is.
So because medicine is socialized in Ecuador, they weren't like paid, and they never aspired to be like private practice doctors because that's how you make money over there, especially in South America. So they were struggling. They were medical professionals saving people's lives, children's lives, but they were struggling financially. And the country was in disarray, and we can go into great lengths about like what it means to live under the United States economic empire, right? Because I grew up in a time when there was a lot of como se dice, there was a lot of political turmoil in our countries because of U.S. foreign policy. A lot of our leaders were being assassinated left and right. So you reap what you sow. I remember reading once that the reason why there's so many like Indians in England or Nigerians in France is because the colonized will always go to the land of the colonizer. So if you wonder why there's so many Latin Americans in the United States, we have to consider what U.S. foreign policy has been doing since the 70s and 80s and 90s in these countries.
Wow.
But I wrote a comedy, so I'm not here to talk about like
Yeah, no.
geopolitical warfare or anything.
But you look to your parents, and they're very hardworking people, and they come to this country, and that like either consciously or subconsciously,
Yeah.
you have a big opportunity, and you're
Absolutely.
headed for UCLA because
Absolutely.
of your parents.
I know I have a big opportunity, and this is part of like something I've been kind of dealing with since publishing the book. I've realized that I've dealt with a lot of trauma of being successful because of them. I've dealt with a lot of pressures of needing to justify their sacrifice to come to this country.
Ooh, that's
Right? I didn't phrase it in that way as I wrote the book, but I do end the first chapter by saying that the hardest lesson my parents ever taught me in this country is that the American dream is not for you, but for your children.
children.
And when I wrote that line, I was crying writing that line, but at the same time, that line freed me because it allowed me to realize, you know what, my parents came to this country not for me, but for themselves. They wanted a better life. Then they discovered that the system is not conducive to immigrants or refugees or undocumented Americans or whatnot. And then they put all their hopes and dreams into me, which is rightfully so. But I always grew up feeling like they sacrificed everything for me. So if
Yeah.
I'm not a success, then their journey to this country and their sacrifice was all in vain.
Right.
And I needed that line and that understanding to free me from the pressure that I've always grown up with.
That's a deep line, and a line that's not easily arrived at. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and I resonate. It's like you were saying. It's like we read. There was a lot of commonality here between you and I, and that line to me, I think, came with hearing that line is so deep because yeah, it's like you are place these unnecessary pressures on a young person who's
Yeah.
trying to figure out the world. So as if the figuring out life isn't hard enough, now you have a 45-pound dumbbell
Woo, boy, let me
weight
tell you.
on your back, and it's like, now what? It's like the game is already hard. I don't need to start playing it on legendary mode. It's It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah, but the double-edged sword on that one, when I talk to a lot of college students, and always like first generation college students, they either have that pressure on their back or they have a different pressure, and that's that I can't convince my parents that I need to go to college because they want me to start working, or they want me to start like contributing to the economy of the household. And I always, when I speak to them, and when I'm able to speak to parents, I always try to remind everyone that these children, these students, are the greatest investment that you're going to make in this country. You have got to support them in their pursuit for higher education.
Yeah. Yeah, there are the pressure. There are pressures of like, you know, I mean, how many of our peers like in college do we like get to know, and then by the time graduation hits, they're out in the world making
Yeah.
money, and sure, it's
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
the opportunity cost. But it's tough. I remember working in Seal Beach at a steel factory through college, and there was a gentleman from Zacatecas who worked in the department where they would paint. You know, these it was like slot machines that they made,
Okay.
and they would powder paint them, right? And they charged the metal thing, and the powder would come out of this like gun, and the powder sticks to it, and that's how they painted it. They put it into like fire, like a kiln of some sorts. And I remember he walked over and saw me doing accounting homework, right? He goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, homework." He goes, "That looks complicated." He's like, "How much do you make at your station?" Minimum wage at the time. He goes, "You know how much money I'm making?" I'm like, "I don't know." He said something upwards of like $30 an hour. He goes, "How much are you gonna make when you graduate doing accounting stuff?" I'm like, "I don't know. You probably get like a cool job at like 75K a year." He goes, "I get overtime." So it's like sometimes the circumstances kind of dictate
Oof.
how limited our vision is, and I
Yeah.
couldn't help but have my heart drop. Now I'm making minimum wage, but I knew that the future could be bright if I went in this direction. I ended up doing comedy, but 75K sounds great. No, but
Are they hiring?
yeah, are they hiring? I'm thinking of going back. But it's that, it's like sometimes we don't see the bigger picture, the bigger picture of what could be. The possibilities are endless with education.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard for our parents and for our tios and tias. I mean, there's no book on how to America, right? So we're all just trying to figure it out. Like when I was in high school, I didn't know what high school was except for what I saw in the TV.
Right.
So that's why I have this chapter in the book called "Becoming Zach Morris" because I just watched Saved by the Bell on the weekends on reruns. I was like, oh, I'm gonna do what that white dude is doing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run for class president. I'm gonna like start a band, and I created this high school reality for myself that I saw on TV because I didn't know how to high school in the United States.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And then it all goes back to that pressure. It's so funny. Even as you say that, it all goes back to that initial pressure of like, sometimes unnecessarily. I mean, our parents didn't know any better. I always think of this through therapies. Like sometimes our parents, the ones that place the biggest pressures and weight on our backs from an early age. It's like remember that they're doing the best they can with what they had at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that is very liberating
Yeah.
too, because it's like, okay, well, I'm gonna make some of those mistakes in my journey as well.
There, listen, my reality in my book and my story is different because my mom tried to shelter me from the fact that we were undocumented. And a lot of people have asked me, are are you grateful or are you upset that she lied to you? And I was like, my mom was just trying her best. Like
Yeah.
she didn't know. But the reason why I'm grateful that she did is because of what she said to me after I asked her why she didn't tell me the truth of our legality. I was like, why didn't you? I mean, you're a chismosa. Like you
Right.
like you say all the gossip and the chisme. Why did you keep this piece of information from me? And what she said was, your dad and I didn't tell you because we didn't want you to grow up feeling different because dreams should not have borders.
Mm.
My brother, that changed my life. Like I needed that kick in the ass to be like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm not gonna let my legality or my status, my immigration status, like affect what I'm gonna try to achieve in the world.
Having a book like the one you have written, like what is the initial reaction that you get from sharing it at schools, at events? I feel like schools it's a very unique thing, right? It's like because you're possibly presenting to a class where a student in there is living that same story. It's like,
Absolutely.
what is that like?
Well, first, I was talking to undocumented college students 48 hours after the elections. So it's been very emotional, but they're very empowering. Like they understand that the system is rigged against them, but they're not going to allow anybody, despite of who resides in the White House, to dictate how they're going to live their lives. And I find that very inspiring because they have all right to be defeated and depressed by like the rhetoric that exists in our national politics. Um, but I will say that in writing this book, I thought I knew the audience I was writing to.
Mm.
I thought I was writing for like the 63 million Latinos in the United States. I thought I was writing this book for like the dreamers, right? The undocumented students in college and high school. But it turns out that the people who have most written to me about this book are first generation Americans. They've been Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, Filipino Americans who read my book and go, holy shit, those were my parents.
Yeah.
You lived the life that I live with my crazy immigrant parents with the same pressures. I have a chapter which was actually supposed to be the title of the book.
Really?
The book was supposed to be How to Disappoint Your Immigrant Parents Without Trying. That was going to be the title of the book. But then we settled on Illegally Yours because it's like shorter and more to the point.
Yeah.
But people write to me about that chapter most of all. That the How to Disappoint Your Immigrant Parents Without Trying. Like, dude, I disappointed my immigrant parents. I was just trying to make them proud, you know?
Yeah, because I think it's a shared story no matter where the background is.
Absolutely.
It's the same struggle.
Yeah.
It really is. It's it's like I want to be at a school where you make a presentation because that to me was like the biggest, like, after writing the kids book, it's like I didn't know that kids presentation, like presenting at schools is a big part of writing a book, you know? So I was pleasantly surprised. But one of the things I found with my book was, you know, when I talk about, you know, growing up, you know, mowing lawns with my dad, at the end of it, you know, it's like, cause my mom is in it, my late mother is in the book too. And, you know, she cleaned houses and was a nanny that, you know, kids come up and it's like, oh, my mom limpiaba casas too.
Oh,
you know, it's like, oh, my dad is a gardener or my grandpa's a gardener. When I said it, it did not have that tone.
yeah.
It was, my dad's a gardener. You look down. It was a point of embarrassment. And to share a story that's so near and dear to me, but also have the kids go, like I could be saying is like, my dad was a professional athlete. Like it's that same tone.
Yeah.
And do you feel that people really come to you with these stories of like, oh man, it's like we've been in the trenches together?
Yeah. Oh man, absolutely. The folks who reach out to me about like what it meant to be first generation American and what it meant to deal with the family pressures, like how do you not see yourself reflected on that?
Yeah.
And you know, it's funny that you say this thing about the gardener because in my high school, my best friend Napo, his dad was a gardener. And they had more money than all the white kids at school. They were rolling deep, you know? So we didn't grow up being like, oh, he's a gardener. I mean, yeah, you'd look down upon it, but we knew the truth because we knew like the small business mentality of like growing a company and how much money they made.
Yeah. So when you're writing a memoir, because it's like that's also tough. Like it's like when you put yourself out there and you're speaking your stories, like what is the process of selecting the stories that are gonna make Illegally Yours? Like how do you like? I almost imagine like an artist going into the studio and you know you got an album coming up and you record 100 songs and you're like, what 17 tracks are gonna make the album?
Yeah, I will say like some of my favorite like Spanish language artists, like whether like it's Karol G or Bad Bunny, they're so good at picking themes for their albums, and I believe that's true for writing. Especially when you're writing TV and film, like the story is not the plot, the story is the theme. And I feel we all have like memoirs to write and we have multiple memoirs to write. This just happened to be the one that's on a specific theme. And my theme is what it means to be American. So every chapter either deals with that or it's an immigration story.
Okay.
Because this book is exactly from me coming to this country until me actually receiving my green card. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read the book.
Yeah. Go buy the book.
Yeah. But that I knew that's the story that I wanted to tell. Like I have many more stories from my childhood, but I wanted this to be on theme, on being American, on being an immigrant to this country, and growing up undocumented.
What was that collaboration like between you and your editor?
Yeah.
Right, you get the deal,
Oh my
you
God.
ink it, and you're like, "These are my stories." It's like, yeah, walk us through that.
Okay. You know what's funny is that, and I fucking love my editor with all my heart. What was funny is like when I would write some stories and she'd be like, no, I don't think parents would leave their children alone at that age. I was like, she's like, no, I don't think at that age you should be like handling a stove and cooking. I was like, so there was
funny.
cultural differences that,
Sure.
that I think she thought I was lying. I was like, why would I lie to you? Like, this is the stuff I was doing at that age. But otherwise it was so beautiful. She was able to like actually push me to tell like deeper stories or stories that I was not quite ready to share, because it feels uncomfortable when you write about yourself.
Yeah.
And I knew that above all, I wanted to tell my parents' story.
Mhm.
I wanted to show the opposite side of the undocumented media coin that we see, right? We always see undocumented workers like jumping our fences and quote unquote invading our nation. I was like, that's not true. That's not my reality. That's definitely not my parents' reality.
Mhm.
So I wanted to show like these undocumented immigrants that paid freaking taxes.
Correct.
Like, you don't see those stories, so I wanted to make sure to tell those stories. But my editor, what she was actually getting at is like, you have to make it about yourself. And what are you feeling up in this point? And I gotta tell you, that was the best learning for me, because remember, I come from TV and film.
Right.
I hit the emotions, I hit the precise description, and then I'm out. And she's like, no. Elaborate. What are you feeling in this moment? And I'm like, I can't just put cut to and go to the next page.
Right.
She's like, no.
Yeah, all the mechanics that you're accustomed to and that
Yeah.
you found great success in and have a command of, it's like you're no longer able to use those.
No, they're vastly different. So it's more like therapy. Like, okay, what am I feeling in this moment? Here we go. And I'm like, I'm writing a comedy, crying my eyes out. Like, but I will say, here's the hardest thing of writing a memoir. Because you want to make sure that the things you remember are accurate.
Okay.
So I would interview like my family members and my friends. And man, I actually accidentally stumbled into realizing that some of the things I was told as a child weren't true.
Oh, interesting.
And that, my friend, crushed me, because that meant like the person that I am and the building blocks that I created for myself, the foundation, some of those are lies. And
air bubbles on
man,
that, yeah, wow.
that those really hurt. And there's some stories in the book where I go, I can't verify this story, but it was always told to me, and it was an important part of who I am, so I'm going to share this.
Yeah.
But every other story is true, and I was able to verify. But there's a few of those that I couldn't.
What was the hardest chapter for you to put together and agree to put out there? Because I mean, all of them are very personal.
Yeah.
Even though some like they're comedic, someone, but it's like you never know somebody's parameters of how comfortable they are releasing certain stories.
Yeah.
Which one was that for you?
Well, to be completely honest, I got this book deal, and the premise was simple. It's like, what happens when the all-American high school student discovers he's not American at all, right? That's the story. And it's the story of a tight-knit family that is American in every sense of the word except one. But that tight-knit family was always at the core of what the story was. Then I got a book deal, and a few months later, my parents get a divorce in real life. And then it felt like, oh man, my whole story is a sham. My whole story is like false. Like I don't want to write this. This is too painful. Then I'm discovering like some things aren't true, and I'm like, who is? And my mom's great. Who is my dad? And then my book agent was like, I understand your pain. Do you want to return the advance? I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm definitely not going to do that.
Slow down.
Slow your roll. So I wrote the last chapter first.
Wow.
It was the hardest chapter to write, but it was the chapter that gave me the permission to write this book, because I realized in writing the last chapter, I needed to guard and protect my memories from everybody, including my parents. And once I did that, I was like, oh, now I can write my story the way I remember it, with that same sense of hope and love and happiness, because I'm not going to judge them for what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So the hardest chapter to write was the last chapter, but it was also the first chapter I wrote. And I'm telling you, Jesus, the second I wrote that last chapter, the rest just flowed out of me easily.
You know, there's been a couple times in our conversation so far that you've said that this thing has given you permission, right?
Yeah.
I think that's very deep because there are different markers in your journey and writing this. Is like, you know, this statement or this thing gave me permission. It's like, what is the biggest thing you learned? Because this felt like this was like like a a companion to therapy,
Oof.
and you learn so much about it. So where you are now to where you were before, where you're thinking about returning an advance, which I think is the right move. What have you learned now about yourself that you didn't know before?
That I think what you're getting at is that permission that you're always looking at other people comes from within, right?
Yeah.
Like, where's Waldo? Like, plot twist, Waldo finds himself.
Find yourself. Yeah.
It's so much of that.
Yeah.
Like, so much of this book was to make my parents proud, and then they let me down by some of their actions. Or I discovered some truths about my dad from the past, and I was like, oh my God, he's not the guy I thought he was, you know?
Yeah.
But they're just human, right? And they're all flawed. And we are all flawed. So once I stopped looking externally for that validation and found it inside myself,
Made things a lot easier.
it makes things so much easier, my brother.
A lot of weight is shed and
Yeah.
and shifted off of. Yeah, I remember seeing this video online where there was a like a speaker talking about how we carry weights, and he picks up. I wish I can remember his
Yeah.
name, but he picks up physical like weights, dumbbells, and this kind of thing. He goes, "How easy it is to let it go." It's like, here we are, and then we have no more room to carry the things that truly matter. You know,
Ooh.
it's yeah, it's writing a memoir. I can only imagine. I remember reading this thing about John Leguizamo, right, where he talks about when he was putting on his one man shows, right, that afterwards he would, you know, they would be in black box theaters, like smaller kind of size thing, that as he's running the show, that afterwards people would come in. I'm paraphrasing
Yeah,
here
of
what I
course.
remember, that people after the show would say, "Hey, I dealt with something like that," or they start talking to you about your, you know, your story,
Yeah.
and that he felt uneasy.
Mm.
Have you encountered anything like that when somebody kind of talks to you about a element in your book and you're like, "Ooh, I've never had this conversation with a quote unquote stranger before."
Yeah.
Have you dealt with anything like that?
No, not when you treat people with compassion and you know where people are coming from. I actually had the opposite experience where before I had written my book, my community college gave me alumnus of the year award, and I'm like, "What are you trying to say? I'm old? Like this is cold blooded." But it turns out that the reason they reached out to me was because they had a lot of undocumented students, so they wanted them to see someone who was formerly undocumented who went on to be like successful, quote unquote. And it was in that speech in that stadium on that summer day when I first shared that I was undocumented. And I remember, and it was like, you know, can you imagine like thousands of people in the stadium? I shared my story of discovering I'm undocumented in high school and went on to do what I did. When the entire stadium cleared out at the end of the ceremony, 50 beautiful brown kids in like caps and gowns waited for me. They were all undocumented. And they
Wow.
just wanted to talk to me to
I'm getting goosebumps.
bro, I started crying because they were just like they just wanted to be heard. They just wanted to be seen, and all they needed to hear was, "I promise it gets better and don't give up." And it was after talking to them that I was like, I need to write my story.
Yeah.
Like, because it meant so much to be reflected and to be seen.
Yeah, somebody on a path like that, sometimes, like you said, it's like it the permission comes from within, and it takes time to learn that. But when you have a young student on their journey, you know, sometimes that support isn't at home, and sometimes
Yeah.
they just need somebody in the place they want to get to, just, a simple nod, that ripple effect can be huge.
Yeah.
You're talking to family, right? You're
And can I just add one more
yeah,
thing?
of
In
course.
media in particular, because we both work in media, and we talk about the importance of representation in media, but I think we truly have to understand it in this way. There's a communication scholar named George Gerbner who coined the term symbolic annihilation.
Symbolic.
Symbolic annihilation. And that's when a group of people are underrepresented or completely excluded
Mm.
from mass media. Now, why is this important? For me, it's important because symbolic annihilation means that as a young immigrant boy, I grew up not seeing myself in film, TV, books, journalism. So I don't grow up feeling like I'm part of the fabric of this nation, right? That's at best. But at worst, symbolic annihilation results in a mass murderer, like what happened in El Paso, Texas, because he saw innocent Americans as quote unquote illegals or invaders. So that is the importance of like improper media representation.
Proper, yeah.
And that's what I felt like these students from this graduating class at Mount San Antonio College were saying. Like, we had never seen an undocumented person speak so eloquently in front of like thousands of people. Like, this is so great. And thank you for speaking for us. And what else can we do? Right.
Yeah. And so freely too, because it's like when one is in that situation, it's like you're told to keep to yourself and not
Yeah.
but here you are confidently speaking your truth and your story, and they're going it's like, well, he's doing it exactly opposite of what they told us to
That's
do.
right.
You know?
Because we grew up with this idea that, calladita es más bonita, right?
Yeah.
Like, stay quiet, keep to yourself, don't be loud, don't. But we're only now learning, like, no, we need to take up space. We need to show
Yeah.
people that we're here, that we contribute, that we're just as good as anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's through telling our stories that we're able to get out there and dispel people's, preconceived notions of whatever it is that they think, and yeah, it's
God damn, but I wrote a comedy. So this is the hard part. Like, you're a stand-up, I wrote a comedy, and we're getting so serious.
but
right
you
now.
know what? That's so funny that you say that because like I remember doing so twice this has happened, right? I did a documentary with ARP about caregiving,
Oh my
and,
God.
and I was caregiver. I had to take my parents on the road with me because I can't afford a caregiver at the time, and it's like my late mother, was still around, so I'm taking both of my parents, and they followed me for a year, so they were like kind of filming this thing like around other comedians, right? And
Wow.
and the director, amazing director, Julie Getz. I had the time of my life, which she goes, I noticed that when you get comics together, the conversations tend to be serious and heartfelt. And she goes, I remember that she goes
Wow.
something to the effect, he's like, I thought it was going to be silly and
Yeah.
off the wall humor. And it's like, that's what we do, but the source of it is, it's like, I've always described it this way. I feel like we, like storytellers, are alchemists. We take a
Mm.
sad story and we find out the other direction that it could go. For me, I've dedicated my whole life to comedy. So I've taken, serious things. In my first special, I talk about living the American dream backwards. It's like I mow lawns, got an education. No, it's like I got an education, follow my dreams, and then mow lawns. It's like I found the funny of it. So it's like the truth of it. The truth of it is, in that special, I talk about why. I'm
Yeah.
taking care of my dad who had colon
Yeah.
cancer at the time. So you put your dreams on hold to do this other thing. But I do find that we most times, when we have conversations like these, it's you wrote a comedy. I've dedicated my life to comedy, but this is the source. This is the well where it comes from. And we have a superpower.
Oof. What is that quote by Robin Williams who said, like, people who've had the darkest paths are the ones who most want to make people laugh?
I would say louder for
Right.
the people in the back. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's boxers, comedians, they don't come from good homes.
Yeah.
It's like you learn to duke it out in the best way you know how. I'm definitely not a fighter. It's like you write jokes, how do you express your story? How do you, we all have, yeah, I'm on stage talking about like, caregiving stories and stuff. And it's like at the end of it, as silly as it may seem, is like there's a message there, and yeah, I'm a big fan of what you do and your storytelling and you speaking your truth out there. Is like we need more
Thank you,
people
man.
like you out there. It's like I can't help but wonder uh, the impact, the ripple effect that you telling your truth is doing for some young student out there from a similar background. They don't have to be Latino. They may have just the same journey from a different angle.
It's been a godsend. Being able to speak to a lot of community colleges because of it has been a godsend. I'm very fortunate, but I did tell my publisher that I just want to write the book I didn't have when I was growing up, right?
That's
Like
it.
I think I would have read this and been like, oh, it's gonna be okay, and I would have had less fear, less like hangups and trauma in my life. But yeah, I'm like Schindler's List, like he who saves one life saves the world entire.
I've said it before. I can't, I feel like I've brought it up a couple of times on this season, but it's like writing the book. It's like, why did I write a kid's book? It's like I feel like, I wrote, to your point, I wrote the book that had the character that I wish was there. It's like there was no
Yeah,
characters that looked like us.
yeah,
Growing up. It's like Clifford the Big Red Dog. That was the closest I could identify with a character. It's like big silly dog got into trouble. It's like fun. I was always a big kid, so I'm like, yeah, that's my guy. But it's like when I was able to put my parents into a book. Imagine what my parents not having any formal education in their own language, seeing themselves in a book represented in Spanish
yeah.
and English means
Mm,
something.
preach.
What you
And for me, I gotta say, like looking back at my childhood, it had to be like Benny the Jet Rodriguez in The Sandlot, and maybe
okay?
like Rufio from Hook, that movie with
Yeah.
just seeing like cool like minorities doing stuff. I was like, oh man, I want to be that. Those are like the few things I remember.
That was so great too. Like in the book, you talk about it where it's like your heroes were on TV. I feel like for a kid that English is their second language, it's like it's music or TV,
Right?
right? And then when you come to find out that these superheroes, it's like you're talking about American Ninja,
Yeah.
like Rambo is like,
Yeah.
oh, you find out that they also have uh uh they're not American, whatever. Yeah, like
Yeah.
they are American, but it's like they
Well,
have
like
different
Arnold
roots.
Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, all these like early action stars that we admired. I was like, oh, they're not American either. This is great.
I love that you listed them off. It's like also from somewhere else. It's like, but we don't know that. We just look at it and we're like
Yeah.
that's what it is.
That's America. And that's probably how I got into wanting to be in media and in film and TV, because I remember it's one of the few things that my parents and I bonded over. Me and my dad in particular, we would sit down and watch action movies because
Mhm.
you don't have to translate kicking ass, right?
Oh
So we
yeah,
just sit down and watch action movies and be like, I hope I could do that one day.
I love that line in the book. It's like you don't have to translate kicking ass. I think that is like so brilliant. I'm like, yes, it's universal.
Yeah.
What has been the feedback from your family? I can't. I'm curious to like your friends. Because you talked about it earlier. It's like you have to go have these conversations like after the fact, seeing all the accolades, the awards, the opportunities that a book like this has sprang into existence for you. Is like what is their feedback?
I gave it to my mom. The one I'm most worried about was my mom. Like I gave her the advanced copy, and I heard her in her room like laughing and going over the
Yeah.
book. And then when she finished it, she came out of her room and just held me and cried for like 5 minutes. And I was like, that's it. That's all I needed. I don't care what the book does. Like as long as she felt like I did right by her, I'm very happy. If anything, what I've had is from like aunts and uncles who are like, well, I did all this stuff for you guys. You didn't write anything about me. I was like, oh, snap. I never thought I'd get that. Like, oh, how dare you not write about me? And I had to explain, no, but this is about like immigration. It's not like the other stories that we have together is not like on theme.
That's so funny. I'm sure you're getting some hard pitches. It's like if you write a next one, you should.
Yeah.
talk
Oh,
about this.
dude, hardcore. Or all the folks were like, oh, dude, if you think that's a good, I have a story for you. I was like, I know. I think like that's the funniest thing. Like I get pitched ideas at like the family barbecue and at the holiday dinners together. I'm like, oh shit, here we go.
So yeah, maybe a second book could do it. It's like put all the stories that didn't make it.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Are you are you considering another book?
I am. So the cool thing is because I work in film and TV, I am developing into a TV show. I can't say like with Hooch is the
Great, great,
where it's
yes.
going, but like I'm in development for that. And I. So here's the funny thing. I think you know this about me, that I live with my mom and my grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
and my publisher wanted me to write a book about that dynamic of what it feels like to to live like the Golden Girls
Yeah.
in one household. And I started outlining that book, but a different book came to me a few months back, and I'm starting my second book.
That's
I'm starting my
amazing.
second book, and I'll get back to the Golden Girls soon. But my book agent essentially wants me to write my first novel, so I'm working on my first novel.
Oh, amazing!
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
wait. I can't wait to check it out. Your writing is phenomenal. And,
Thank you,
and,
my brother.
And you know, just years of screenwriting, I'm sure is like, you know, you have all these skills, but you develop so much more with these. I mean,
Yeah,
it's,
well, for sure. Like iron sharpens
what would you
iron.
say? What would you say is the biggest difference between screenwriting and writing a memoir? Like, what is?
It to me, it's exactly what I was saying earlier, that you have to like breathe out a moment. Like you have to guide the reader on what you're feeling in that moment. In film and TV, so much of it's like, because the visual medium, you want to leave them with a visual thing, or with a visual impact that makes them feel something. But in books, like you literally have to spell it out.
Right.
And that was an acquired talent. I was like, oh shit, I have to spell this out. Okay, what am I feeling? You know?
Yeah.
So that was the biggest. That was the biggest. But otherwise, like I swear to God, I wrote this like I was writing an episode of television. Like,
Yeah.
Oh, I will say this. I erroneously, if that's the right word, English is my second language. I wrote each chapter almost like an episode.
I was gonna say this is like more like this is a show, and each of the story. That's why I was like, I was curious how you put together the album.
So
the season.
that's how I started. I started like, okay, I wrote each chapter as a standalone episode. The problem with that is that you can't have a beginning, middle, and end, because the book is the beginning, middle, and end, right? So I realized, oh, okay, to make it all work as one, I kind of have to get rid of the ending of each chapter / episode to make it flow, because like the whole journey is an arc.
And plus, you started with the ending, right?
Yes,
And so wow.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, I just want to thank you. I'm a big fan of what you do.
Oh,
I
likewise, my brother.
mean, these are stories worth telling and worth reading. I hope people out there watching this takes time to go buy the book, get the audiobook, get the real book, and I'm excited and looking forward to your next one. And
yeah, I mean, my publisher would love for you to buy it, but if you steal it from your local bookstore, it could be illegally yours.
Or check it out from your local library.
Yeah.
Go ask for it. That's how these books get into the library. Go ask for it. Libraries are a very special place in my heart. So if you can't buy it, if you can't get the audiobook, go to your local library and get the book. Rafael, thank you so much. This means the world to me. Thank you for coming.
No, thank you for having me. This is dope.
Thank you, man.
Dope. Thank you.
And that's it. Jesus Trejo Book Club. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.